We'll be live in 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Hello, good morning, and welcome to the session How to Be a Better Online Teacher, facilitated by Darby. He's an Assistant Dean of Online and Innovative Pedagogies at North Arizona University, San Francisco, USA. If we navigate her beautiful website, www.flowerderby.com, we find the beautiful tagline that innovating through excellence in teaching and learning design. We also find that she's an educator, an author, and a speaker. And I must say that she is a co-author of a small teaching online book, Applying Learning Science in Online Classes. I'm not going to add more about her. She is one of the prominent speaker, especially on online teaching and learning. And today we have different objectives, especially after the session participants of this webinar will be self-aware about how much they're ready to teach online, as well as we'll have some outstanding online teaching principles written by Flower Derby, and we watched and inspired from the article published in the Chronicle. And the most attractive part of this webinar is question and answer session with Flower Derby. The webinar today is a bit differently organized. As we experienced earlier, we hadn't experienced this kind of webinar. In Daffodil especially, we have participants in Google Meet. Right now we have 52 participants in Google Meet, and as well as we have live participants in YouTube Live. For the Google Meet participants, you can ask question during question and answer session. You can unmute your microphone and you can ask live question using your voice. And we would like to congratulate you again because we have shortlisted you and selected for this Google Meet participation live with the facilitator, because we have found that you are passionate in terms of learning online teaching from Flower Derby based on the registration form, 2 questions, and you had some questions. Congratulations. We would like to say that from HRDI, we will definitely recognize you with certificates. And for YouTube Live participants, you can ask question as usual. I would like to show you on our site. If you navigate this site, after clicking this button for live video of this webinar, click here to ask question. If you are on a live YouTube or in this site, you can click here to ask question, and you can write your question. We'd like to definitely address your questions in the question and answer session. And there are so many participants already here who wished us with good morning and assalamu alaikum, 26 questions. Thank you for participating. And we're going back to our facilitator today, Full Money. Can I welcome you, Full Money?
Thank you so much. Very nice to be here, Ejaj. Thank you for that lovely introduction. It is my honor to be here with you all, and I'm very excited to share some of my passion for online teaching and to learn more about what you're doing and to learn from you as well. With that, if it's okay, I'll go ahead and share my slides, and we will talk through some of those principles from the Chronic Advice Guide with plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's pull up the slides. And I do want to review some of what's in that article, but we have plenty of time to talk as well. And I'm just getting used to Google Meet, but that's okay. Let's just jump right in here. So if you're here live in the Google Meet session or watching on YouTube, I will ask you to reflect for one moment and think about how you feel about online teaching. You can put that into the chat box, although that's my question. I'm not seeing how to see the chat box at the same time as I'm sharing my slides. So, Ijaj, if you have a recommendation, I'm happy to have that. But whether you put that in the chat box or just make a mental note for yourself or jot that down on paper, what is one word that describes the way that you feel about online teaching? And we will think about that as we continue with the presentation. So, I think it is fair to say that there are challenges with online teaching and learning, and for me, it's very important to think about and to acknowledge what some of those challenges are, because it is harder in many ways to teach online effectively than it is in person. And so some of those challenges that we can identify, I was just talking about with Ijaj just before this event started, and he articulated many of the same issues that I have found in my own work, which is primarily that we don't really know what it looks like to do really effective online teaching in a learning management system. Um, as we know, none of us really were online students ourselves. And if you think about it, we have years, oftentimes decades, of being students and teachers in physical classrooms ever since our earliest childhood years at school. But we don't have that kind of experience in online classes. I do think this will change. I think over time that tomorrow's faculty members will have been online students for much longer than any experience that we may have. But it is the case right now that we don't even really know what it looks like in the same way that we know how to teach and what it looks like in person. It's also the case, I think it's fair to say, that very few faculty members today ever set out to be a great online teacher. I don't think many of us had that as our career goal when we went into higher education. We wanted to teach, we were passionate about our students, we love our content so much that we became experts in it. But being an awesome online teacher was probably not at the top of our career list. And so that may impact our interest in learning how to teach online. If we're honest, some of us aren't that interested in becoming great online teachers, although I know that's not the case today because you have been handpicked for your interest in learning to do this better. But let's face it, online teaching doesn't feel the same as it does to be in a room with your students. In fact, I wish very much that we were all in one room together right now. I've had some opportunity to travel to some wonderful places in the world, and I would love to be there with you in the room and interacting with you in a much richer way. But we know that there are lots of reasons why that's not possible, especially right now in this unique moment of time. And so if we haven't yet learned how to really enjoy online teaching, then that, of course, will affect our motivation to do it better. And just before we started, I was reviewing many of the questions and the comments that you all had filled in on your application to participate in the registration form. And I found a lot of comments about students not being very well prepared to learn online. And I think that adds to the challenge. We are struggling to learn how to do this well, and so are our students. Again, they're very accustomed to attending classes in person. They've been doing it for so many years by the time they get to us, but many of them don't have the skills or, again, the interest in learning online. And so I think it's fine to recognize that we are facing some challenges so that we know what we're up against. But I also think it's very important to think about why we want to do this better. And I believe if you're here today, that you are motivated to to be a teacher. We know that online education makes it more possible for students to attend classes and to pursue a college education. And I know for a fact that if you're a college educator, that you see the value of a college education for our future society, for our future national and global society, given how interconnected we are increasingly becoming as a humankind. And so educated citizens are more engaged, they are more creative problem solvers and critical thinkers, and we know that these skills will be very important as we face the complex problems are. For example, I don't think any of us could ever have anticipated the impact of coronavirus and what's happening in our global society today. So we know that it's important to help people achieve a college education if they want that. And online teaching really does make it more possible for more people to achieve that goal. And so if we care about our students and if we want them to be successful, then that's our motivation for wanting to do this better. And with that, I think it's really important to remember that we get to have opportunities like this where you see your students engaging with the content and helping each other learn and hopefully having some fun as well in the social interaction. And the question for me has become, how do we do this? How do we foster the connections between our students and ourselves? How do we create a learning in online classes? Well, before we go very much further, this overview of the community of inquiry framework, and you can look this up online after this session because this will be only a very brief introduction, but it really is a very useful way to think about effective online teaching. So the community of inquiry framework came about as a result of research in the late 1990s. A team of researchers wanted to find out what goes into a good online class, or as they called it then, computer-mediated instruction. And in the year 2000, this team of researchers published this article that identified 3 presences. For me, I'd like to think about it more as ingredients. 3 ingredients that when you have all 3 of these elements, that you result in deep learning, effective teaching, and a good online class experience. And those are represented within these 3 circles in the center of this diagram. Cognitive presence is the thought work that goes into the online class and that students engage in. So for me, it's about the content that you plan, the learning activities, the kinds of quiz projects and homework assignments and such that you're asking students to do. But it also has to do with your students' thought processes as well. How are they making sense of the content? How are they understanding it? That but important. We have to teach online, and then frequently students bring anxiety or perhaps frustration or uncertainty, lots of emotions that students bring into online classes as well. And this researcher argued that the emotional happenings in an online class are just as important to pay attention to as the other 3 ingredients. And in fact, that we can put emotions to work for us by designing online classes to foster a student's sense of optimism, confidence, positivity, and indeed we can even harness the power of emotions, focus, engage, and enjoy their learning. So emotions are actually very powerful, and we can talk more about that if you like during the question and answer session. But this is just an overview of the 4 ingredients that are equally necessary to create an effective online class. So with that, we're going to talk through some of the principles and practices, actually all of them. We'll just briefly review them that were in the article that you may have read before today. And then we'll move right into a time of question and answer. So the first principle to really remember the importance of is being there with your online students. And I'll just contrast in person. You don't not go to class. If you're teaching a class in person, you go to the classroom at the appointed time and day, and you interact with your students, you teach. But online classes have suffered from a feeling that faculty have where they don't have to actually go into the online class in the same way. And so online classes have a well-established reputation of being like an electronic correspondence course. I don't know if that term makes sense to you, but his traditional students do the work all by themselves and simply mail in their assignments to their instructor. Or in the case of an electronic correspondence course, it might be that they might email their materials. And that's not really an effective online class. You need the interaction. And in order for there to be the interaction and the guidance of students, it means that you have. Now, I believe your learning management system there is Moodle in your blended learning center. I know that sometimes it doesn't feel like a very pleasant place to be. And so you might not want to go to class and interact with your students, but that really is the primary foundational principle. If you're not in class with your students, you won't be teaching very well. I trust that makes sense. Secondly, it's important to your own personality into your online class. There are two primary ways of communicating about the content with your students. Most recently, many people have begun teaching in a live session like this one, where you're talking with your students via a video conferencing system such as Google Meet or Zoom. But that's not, before this very current season, that isn't typically the way that we would think about it. These are asynchronous interactions that happen in the learning management system, in your case, Moodle. And that could be written text, written words, or recorded video communications, such as a mini lecture. And it's really important to remember, no matter what your venue, to be yourself and to be authentic. When we teach in person, our students get to know a lot about us, even from the way that we dress, the way that we speak, facial expressions, our body language when we teach. And sometimes some of us tell our students about some pet did that was silly, or something that happened over the weekend. Some of us don't go into that realm, but we do bring a lot of our own personality into the physical classroom, whether or not we know it, just by the way that we present ourselves. And so it's very important to do the same thing in your online class, but it doesn't happen by accident. You have to make a deliberate effort to show your students who you are as a person in order to that very important social presence, that social interaction. The way that you can do this in an online class is just to talk the way that you talk, and also to write the way that you write. So I meant to say to write the way that you talk. We can bring tone of voice into our writing. And so even if you're writing instructions to your online students, or you're posting a mini lecture, just written text, that with your own tone of voice, with your own style and personality. And even more, of course, when presenting by video, whether that's live or recorded, you can still be yourself in the way that you communicate in the video itself. So using vocal intonation, such as what I am doing right now, to emphasize your points, using your facial expression, and maybe even exaggerating your facial expression a little bit, because the camera kind of flattens everything. So whenever I present online like I'm now, it takes about 200% of my usual level of energy if I'm teaching or presenting in person. So just understanding that it's okay to be yourself. If you are presenting in a video and you trip over your tongue, you'll hear me do it today, I'm sure. In fact, I think I already have done this. It's okay, because when you teach in person, that happens also, and you don't even let it trip you up. You just keep going. And that's the same that you want to develop that level of comfort in your video presenting. So be and bring your own personality into your online classes is also very important. And we talk also about thinking about your students' situation. Traditionally, in online classes, students are doing their work all by themselves. It is unusual, generally speaking, for an online student to be with another online student in that same class while they're doing their classwork. Typically, online students are doing the classwork by themselves, whether that be at home or at a coffee shop or a library or wherever it might be. And even if students are with other students, they don't have you frequently in real time. So when you're teaching in person, you can ask a question to your class and you can get a sense of where students are with their understanding. You can tell if there's general confusion, if you need to stop and explain again or find a different example to help students understand. But you don't get that real-time feedback when you're teaching online. Even if, again, even if you're teaching like I am, my video conference, I don't see what your reactions are. I don't see your body language or your expressions of interest or boredom or confusion. And so understanding that the real-time feedback is very limited, you have to think harder about making sure that everything is clear. And that's what I mean about thinking about your students' situation, is that you want to anticipate confusion, anticipate where they might have questions, and try to plan in advance so that you can address those things even before your students come into class. And what I mean is providing extra clarification, extra instructions, examples of effective student work. Maybe you could even post like a frequently asked in the class students might be wondering about. And so just being very intentional and very purposeful to think about where students might get confused and how you can help before they have to send you creating a better online class. You also want to think about the organization of the course, and this is related to in online courses. Sometimes the way that we structure the materials and the way that we have it makes a lot of sense to us in our own brain, but keep in mind that you're not there in real time to explain to students what they should do next. And so you want to make the navigation of the course just as simple as you possibly can. If you think about it, our physical classrooms are set up to facilitate learning with desks or chairs set facing the front of the room. And although I have not been in any Bangladeshi classrooms, I know that in many institutions of higher education, there is a front of the room where the professor is expected to stand and teach. And oftentimes there is a lectern or a podium. Perhaps there is a whiteboard or a projection screen. And all those things are set up in the room to facilitate student learning. But this goes back to my point about we don't really know what teaching looks like in online spaces. The learning management systems we have today, in my opinion, are still relatively primitive. I think they could be much better. And one of the things that we sometimes see happening is all the tables and chairs jumbled up on top of each other because we didn't really know how to set up our online classroom. So think about the structure and the navigation of your class as being like the furniture in the room. You want to make it easy for students to come in, to sit down, to start learning and doing what they need to do. And when you try to get that perspective in the way that you've organized your course materials, that can really help students not waste cognitive resources on just trying to navigate, right? We don't want the mechanics of going to class to interfere with their ability to process the content and focus on what's really important. That is not supposed to say organize course content intuitively. Sorry. Let's move on past that point and look at the importance of explaining your expectations. This is related again in my experience to understanding that students are working by themselves and that they typically aren't able to ask a question in real time. Actually been shaped by my husband's experience. Just last month, he graduated with a master's degree from our university, and he took the entire the entire program was fully online. And so I was living with an online student, and I was observing his practice and his experience, and it really informed a lot of my thinking and a lot of my suggestions. So what I've discovered through my husband's experience is he would sit down in the evening, perhaps after dinner, to do some online classwork, and he would have a set number of or a set amount of time, say 2 hours on this evening, and he would know that he would need to get some of his tasks done. But he would sit down and it wasn't clear to him what he was supposed to do or how he was supposed to do it. And I am sure that his faculty tried to give clear instructions, but sometimes that doesn't translate to the student experience. And again, my husband would have 2 hours to get something done. He would not be able to ask a question and get an answer within that amount of time because, understandably, his professors might not be online after dinner. That's fine. But there would be no way for the computer just making faces like, I just don't know what they're asking me to do. And that helped me to think about this point. Again, as I said before, providing extra explanations, instructions, examples of successful student work, rubrics that help students clearly see exactly what are the criteria for success. Anything that you can do to help your online students know exactly what you want them to do is really, really important to help your students be successful. And then this next point is about breaking down complex tasks. So as experienced instructors, you know that students have to have foundational knowledge before they can do more complex processes, before they can solve more difficult problems or form elegant arguments that include rhetorical analysis of dense texts. Have to be able to do some preliminary basic things first. And so that's not new. But thinking about how to do that in an online class, again, requires more intentional thinking and effort. And so what I mean is when we're teaching in person, we do a lot of guidance that you may not even be aware that you're doing. We offer a lot of suggestions. We draw connections for our students just in the way that we're teaching verbally in the classroom. But those things don't happen in an online class. We have to be deliberate to make those connections and down the complex tasks into simpler steps that students can gain mastery over. And it's not just about the content or the content related work. It's also about the technology. So some students might be very new to your blended learning center and they may not understand how to turn in an assignment, or they may not understand a discussion forum. And so I really encourage at the beginning of every online class that you consider including activities where it's just a practice with the technology. Get used to using the technology in the platform, or if you want students to create a video presentation, to have opportunities for them to practice just with the tech, because it might be new for your students as well. Again, I was seeing in the spreadsheet before we started, some of the questions and comments that were there had to do with students' readiness to engage in online learning environments, and sometimes the level of internet access that they might have. So just understanding that the technology is a whole extra learning curve in addition to your actual content helps you to think about breaking down the tasks and helping students to practice with the technology before it's a really important problem. I've already said this a couple on it, but just thinking about the importance of helping your students have lots of examples. So you might need to explain things in 2 or 3 different ways. And again, you might do this in class anyway, in person. Sometimes we offer another example or another illustration when we pick up on a lack of student understanding or a general sense of confusion, which we can read in the room by body language. If we look out at our students in the classroom and we see a lot of faces like, what? Then oftentimes we say, okay, let me explain this a different way. Again, understanding that you can't do that in online classes quite as easily, and especially not if they are asynchronous online classes. You have to anticipate and plan ahead and think about different ways of explaining the same concept. Sometimes that might mean that you want to bring in a YouTube video, has a way of explaining something. So it's just a matter of being creative and planning extra examples and illustrations and analogies that you yourself create and provide, or that you look to see what other faculty members are saying, because people all over the world are teaching some of your same content, and you can find some really great resources on YouTube and other places. TEDx or TED Ed is the educational arm of TED Talks. And so encourage you to think about multiple ways of explaining things to your online students, because you won't see in real time if they're not following the way that you're explaining it. This point goes back to my claim that online classes are not really very pleasant just by nature. As I said earlier, I believe that learning management systems are kind of ugly and kind of sterile and, quite frankly, kind of primitive. I think the user experience leaves a lot to be desired when you compare your experience in the Blended Learning Center versus your experience in various social media platforms and other websites that are much more intuitive and attractive and pleasant. So there's not very much that we can do as individual instructors about the way that the learning system is set up or the way that it looks, because that requires software engineers and the people who are in these companies to pay attention to the learning experience and to make some big changes. However, I would argue that there are things that you can do in your online classes to try to make it a nicer place to be, to try to infuse warmth into the atmosphere. I am convinced that there is an atmosphere in online classes, and we can impact that in a positive way when we bring our own enthusiasm, our optimism, our confidence that our students can learn and be successful. We can set the tone ourselves and create, we can take advantage of a thing called emotional contagion. This is based on emotion science, and you will have experienced this, that when a crowd of people are together, the emotions are stronger. So just imagine a sporting event. I don't know what sport is really big in Bangladesh. Pardon me, I wonder if cricket could be, I'm guessing. But you know that when you're watching a sporting match, or perhaps rugby, with other people, that the emotions are heightened, the same, and that same thing happens. Emotional contagion also happens in your online spaces. And again, if you're skeptical about that, I would encourage you to think about what happens in social media interactions that are all completely online, and think about how emotions can get very heated in social media exchanges, or we can experience tremendous grief based on a current event, a national tragedy, whatever it might be. There are emotions in online spaces, and we impact each other's emotions. Spread online is what I'm talking about. And so you can make a deliberate effort to bring your own enthusiasm and your positivity into your online classes. Again, the way you do this has a lot to do with the way that you communicate with your students, which is true in person. perhaps you post an announcement, and instead of just writing it very mechanically, like, don't forget there's a test on Friday, maybe you add your own personality. My personality is to say, hey, everybody, you're doing great work. You've come so far already. Now, just a reminder, we do have a test on Friday. Make sure you're preparing for that test. Let me know if I can help you. I'm here to support you. That's my personality. That's a message that I would post. Maybe that's not yours, but find some way within your own authentic personality to be a cheerleader, to be a coach, to be a mentor that creates a positive environment for your students just by the way that we write and speak. And finally, and you are demonstrating this here today because you're here. You are committing to continuous improvement. As I have said, there is so much to learn about how to do effective online teaching. Even those of us who have specialized in this, there's a lot to learn. More research needs to happen. More experience needs to be gained. And so we're all on a learning curve. And so taking the time to develop yourself as a good online teacher will do two things. It will make your classes better for your students. I will also argue that it will help you enjoy online teaching more. When you learn how you can do things successful and continue to give to your students, and they will reciprocate and feed you back with some positive energy, with that human enjoyable. Many of you may have seen the information in that article that I quote, research that says only 9% of higher education faculty prefer to teach fully online. And to be fair, that survey, although it did have some international participation, it was primarily United States educators answering that survey. But I think it's still pretty accurate to say that many faculty today don't prefer online teaching to teaching in person. But you could learn to embrace online teaching when you commit to improving yourself by doing things such as you're doing right now, which is to join with a group of like-minded people who want to do this better. Now, on that note, I did compile just a few resources here, and if it would be helpful, I can send these slides after this event for distribution. But these are free resources where you can learn more about being a good online teacher. One HE is One Higher Ed Global, and they are doing some really phenomenal work to support better teaching in general and better online teaching specifically as a result of the current pandemic. So they have some a global collection of resources about online teaching. The next website that I have here is an educational developer in England named Verna Rossi. She's doing phenomenal work, and she has 3 or 4, the fourth one, I don't know if it's there yet, short 30-minute webinar recordings that provide 5 to 6 very practical ideas in each of those recordings that you can think about to make your online teaching more effective. I really like what she's doing there. And then the third website that I have here is a group in the United States, the Association of University Educators, has put together some free resources, an online teaching toolkit, and some webinars that you can access the record. I contributed a lot to the AQ resources, so if you've learned enough from Flower Darby, then don't go there. But additional ideas and very practical suggestions about what to do, you can find more at that AQ website. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my remarks by asking you again to reflect on your word that describes how you feel about online teaching. Do you have a different word? Again, you may feel free to put that in the chat box if you like. And now I'm ready to answer or entertain your questions and have conversation with you. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my slides, and we can just take your questions. And your word. I would love to see if you have a different word. Feel free to put that in the chat box as well.
Motivated. Very nice presentation. It was very exciting. and I was very happy to see you at this point in time in a different time zone, but you look fantastically fresh with a good spirit of sharing, and it was wonderful to hear you. But I have a just very quick question. Are all actually waiting to get some of their question answered from you. But the question that I'm truly enjoying online, that's first one, first expression. The students, I start one class also. We start with the music, we end with the music, and all the class we meet first at Google, then we go into the blended learning center, then we do work together to Google again, Google Meet, and then we conclude the class. And it's going simply amazing because the students are really participating in the whole learning process. My question is that how do you sometimes track those weak learners? They are quiet, they don't ask questions. If I see them, I understand. Since I cannot see them online, what is the best means to discover them? Thank you so much.
Yes, and that's a good and important question. I think that two things. First of all, it's helpful for me to remember that in the classroom, not all students fully engage or participate either. And so it's certainly very possible for students to be present in our classroom and be daydreaming about something, you don't necessarily see that from the outside. So although we want to foster the best participation that we can in online classes, it's valuable to recognize that sometimes students may choose not to. But the other thing that can happen is online classes oftentimes require more writing from students, and that can be a positive or a negative. Perhaps students don't want their question or their comment to be attached to their name. Some students are very shy or they feel not confident about their question, that maybe they question or they don't feel good about their comment or answer. So I actually wonder if some kind of an anonymous participation element would help all that that they're comfortable with. Some students are very confident and ready to jump. Others may not be. They might be more introspective or just less confident. And so maybe you provide something like a Google form where students can just submit questions or comments just anonymous. Poll, I think you're using Slido today, ways that you can encourage people to contribute, again, without necessarily their own name being attached. I think that's really interesting and worth exploring. Now, that might mean that you don't know exactly how much your students are engaging or not on the individual level, but it might be a way to encourage more people to contribute in a format that they're more comfortable with. I hope that helps.
Hello, this is Tahsina. I have a question which I actually posted in the Google form. My question is related to providing feedback. When I was reading that article online pivot last night, I found that you mentioned that we need to personalize our actions with the students and reach out to students not only in the beginning of the course but also in the middle, and it's an ongoing process. Now, each of us, we have at least 4 or 5 courses, and in each average number some. Each week we have 2 classes, and each online class ends with giving them some tasks. Now, when we provide feedback, and if we have a large number of students, how can we make it enjoyable on the part of the teacher and not cumbersome?
That is a wonderful question, and as soon as I have an answer, I'll let you know. Sorry, that was a joke. Really good question, because many faculty find online teaching and grading or feedback to be very draining, very tiring, consuming. So I think you are asking a very good question. I don't have an easy answer, but I can say that here are some strategies that I have seen people use. First of all, your learning management system, Moodle, offers some things that you can use to make grading faster or easier. So, for example, if one of the tasks that students have to complete is an online quiz, you can set those up that your system will grade student quizzes for you based on the way that you set that up and what kinds of questions you choose. So that takes a little bit of the work if you can use some of those auto-graded kinds of functions. Another thing that I have seen to good effect is the rubric tool inside. So that really streamlines feedback because the rubric with criteria for success and different levels of success. And then, first of all, it's very helpful to share that with your students before the task so they know exactly what you're looking for. But secondly, when you use the tool that's in Moodle, you can go through and click, click, click on the different cells very, very quickly. So that can really streamline as well. And one other I was thinking about whether this was one thing or two things, but essentially a couple of ways to do this, and that is to actually be strategic about rotating through your student attendance roster and giving more detailed feedback in a systematic rotation. So as one example, I know faculty who keep a spreadsheet and they mark off when they have interacted more rigorously or in a more robust way with students, and then they make sure to go through each of the students to result in a frequent or a systematic way for all students to get a little bit more attention without every single time all the students get the exact same level of attention. So thinking about, are there ways that you can target particular students? Another variation on this is, for example, if you go to your grade book after, let's say, an assignment or a quiz, and you reach out to all the students who did poorly. Maybe you have a lower than 69% as an example, and you send a message only to those students. The research shows that receiving that communication from the instructor provides a huge boost. But it's a select group of students. So rotating through communication with select groups might be something to consider as well.
Thank you, Floor Darby, for your nice presentation. I am a teacher as well as engineer. And I am worried about my students, engineering students, especially engineering faculty students must need the practical work in their laboratory because they must face the work in their working life. So how is it feasible to conduct this type of practical work in online system, online platform? What do you feel about the engineering education? I mean, especially practical work, lab work in online platform.
Another difficult question. I see that you are all a tough crowd and you're going to ask me hard questions. I don't have a great answer for you, but I do have a couple of thoughts to share. First of all, there are some websites, especially now as a result of COVID-19, lots of resources have been developed for simulations in online spaces to help students at least have a simulated experience of what the lab would teach them. And so I will not say that that is the same as a hands-on lab, but there are a lot of free resources now available. I think if you were to Google, engineering lab simulations, I think that you would find more than you might expect. The other trick is, I don't know what your university is thinking. What I do know in the United States is that as we prepare for our next semester, we're trying to figure out if we can do, say, 85% of the learning in online spaces, but to reserve a little bit for classes that really do need to be hands-on. So I don't know if this is something that is being considered there. Maybe there is a way to be extremely selective, and again, maybe 85% of your content could happen in an online class, but actually we really do need students to come into the classroom or the lab from time to time. Another thing that I have seen that is setting up a video session of you conducting the lab in the classroom. I don't think it's ideal, and that's why I said it's a really tough question, but I hope that gives you something to think about.
Thank you for a nice answer.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Dara. Thank you for your presentation. Actually, before this situation, we even never thought to conduct classes fully online. However, we have conducted a hybrid mode or blended mode. What I do believe that learning must be through pleasure. And one important thing is all the things must be dynamic. So do you suggest any process or any guideline about course organization, how the organization can be dynamic or more effective so that students seems it as one of the interesting thing? What do you think? Do you have any suggestion?
What you're asking is, how do we make online classes more interactive for students? That's the way somewhat accurate?
No, the way of organization of the course. How can we organize the course so that students become more interested to go through that courses?
I see. More interested. Okay. Well, I still have a similar answer. I think that the more students do something with the content, that the better. And I think that when they're learning better, two things happen. I believe there is an increased intrinsic motivation. That if they feel that they're learning and making good progress, it continue to do the work. And I think that then passively being taught. I'm thinking about Aristotle, who is credited with saying for the first time recorded that people learn by doing. You can't learn how to peel a potato just by watching a video of somebody peeling that potato with the potato to become good at it. And the same could be said of online teaching, for that matter. The more we do it, the better we will become. But in order to help students be more more interested, we can organize the course such that there are more opportunities for them to practice, to apply, to process. And for that purpose, I'm a big fan of online discussion forums to get students talking with each other about the content. And when we organize the course such that there's lots of activities for students to do, and let me be clear, I don't mean busy work, meaningful, purposeful activities or problem sets or case studies that get students working with the content for themselves, they will learn it better, and I argue they will feel as a result.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Fariha. So we all know that you are an expert of this area, and you have many years of experience at it, at online teaching. But I want to ask you a simple question: that what one thing you attracts and impresses you most about the online teaching? Just one thing. If I want to know it's personally, that what one thing attracts and impresses you most about the online teaching. That's it. Thank you.
That's another very good question. The thing, can I answer it this way? What I love most about online teaching, is that an okay way to answer that?
Yes, that could be an answer to whatever you prefer. I just want to know that.
I think there's tremendous power in online education achieving people's dreams more attainable. I think the way that online education allows more students to go to college, for me, it really is about helping students or helping people make a better life. I don't know any college students who are taking college classes for no reason whatsoever. Everybody has a goal, and generally that goal has something to do with making a for their families and for their community and society. And so I really believe that good online teaching helps us it will sound like an exaggeration, but I really mean this. I think that when we teach online well, we are literally making the world a better place. And for me, that is what attracts me the most to online teaching. That is what has motivated me to find value in online teaching when many people don't, is because of the world. Sorry if that sounds kind of corny.
No, it's okay. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. This is Rabia here. It is struggle. As we are trying our best to be an online teacher, there's 1, 2, or 5% of students, all of our courses, who are not interested. No matter what we do, whatever the way we design our courses, they're not interested. So I'm trying to add in some one-to-one session with them, but still I can feel that because they give excuses of technical issues, which I know that they don't have. It's the mindset. So what can be done best to help them actually, to motivate them for online classes?
You are all asking me wonderfully difficult questions. What would you do with your in-person students if they weren't fully engaged or motivated?
What do I do with the fully engaged students? Yes, please, your question. Can you ask?
So what, let me believe that faculty and students both are more critical of online classes. And I have some different theories about why that happened. For me to step back and remember that everything isn't perfect in in-person classes either, that sometimes the teaching isn't everything it could be, and sometimes the student engagement is not ideal either.
That's true. So, sorry if I'm interrupted. That's true. But when it comes to online classes, we are basically targeting for 100% student engagement, which is definitely not likely of physical or face-to-face classes. So my question was, what can we do for those students who are not at all interested? I mean, no matter what we do, they're not interested, they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yes, I understand your question, and it is a difficult one, and I will not give you a perfect answer. To think about why they're there. I'm not going to say that this will solve the problem entirely, but it might help do this. One is to do sort of a values affirmation exercise and to work and require students to few questions about even why they're in the class in the first place, or what are their goals, or how does taking the values, what are some of their personal values. There is research to show that there are psychological benefits from getting students to articulate exactly some of those answers, and that again that might lead to intrinsic motivation. I don't say it's a guarantee, but it could help. Another strategy that I really like, I call it a goals contract, and you ask your students to do it at the beginning. Just ask students, again, not unlike the values affirmation, but just to identify what are, for example, I have a formula that I like to use for this. You can ask students to identify 2 goals for their learning in that class, 1 action that they plan to take to facilitate their ability to achieve their goals. And then I also like to ask students 1 challenge. What is one thing that could come up that would hinder your progress or make it difficult for you to be successful? But also, what is 1 strategy that you could take or act on to overcome that challenge? And in both the goals contract and again, I would make that an assignment that is actually worth points, part of the class, not just a theoretical. But in both of those cases, we're asking what the value is of them being in the class or why they're even there. And I think that could help. I don't think it's a perfect solution, though.
Thank you very much. I'm using this 5-question critical incident survey for these students.
Yes.
So this is what they're doing at this moment. I hope that helps. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello,
Go.
this is Dr.
Hello.
Sharifa.
Hi.
Thank you for your nice presentation. Actually, I have a question to you. In case of duration of class, in case of online class, most of the students are becoming bored if you take long class. So, yes, most of the time, how long you take your online class? If you suggest us, it will be helpful for us.
Sure, good question. All we have to do is to think about our own attention span. Even, for example, in this event right here, we're just over 1 hour now. And how are you feeling? Not you personally, but how are we feeling? That we may have developed the course of our career and academic time. So for me, just taking a temperature check of our own, how long can we focus and pay attention, helps. I think shorter is definitely better. If it were me, I might only want to do something for 30 minutes. Within that amount of time, to break it up into activities that students should do. So I didn't model this super well today, but I would be deliberate to ask students questions again that they should put in the chat box, or questions that they should answer on Slido. Things, actual tasks that require a response. I would intersperse those as frequently as I could, maybe even every 5 minutes or so. If you have to teach for longer than 30 minutes, I think it's also very helpful to actually give students a few minutes here and there to do some work themselves. So you could say, okay, here's a problem. I want you to work on this problem. Set a timer for 3 minutes, and then is just a nice, easy thing that you could pull up and say, when this timer goes off, we're going to come back together. And at that time, I want you to put your answer in the chat box. Or, you could come up with activities that happen real time to get and do something in order to help them stay more focused.
Thank you. I would like to, thank you, madam. I would like to read one question from the Slido, from the live participants in the webinar. Dr. Binay Barman, sir asked, and similar question we have about the assessment. Is it not difficult to make assessment cheating free in LMS? And similar question I would like to read again from Kanis Ahmed. Which type of activities do prefer of students in online platforms, group work or individual work? And Rosina madam also asked the same question, that what kind of assessment, different assessment you suggest for some or quizzes?
Okay, good questions. If I'm honest, I think it's almost impossible to prevent cheating in online assessments. And so the advice that I usually give faculty is to assume that students will have open book and open note, to acknowledge that, to let them know that it's okay, and then to design test questions, to write test questions that are not really easy to look up, whether that be in the textbook or by Google. In other words, if you can ask questions that require students to think about the content, to analyze and synthesize and come up with their own answer, that is not an easy thing to look up, that's better. I will also say those test questions are harder to write, but perhaps after the initial effort of writing that kind of a question, you can reuse that test in subsequent semesters, or you'll get return on investment of your time and effort. So I generally recommend critical thinking kinds of questions. Another strategy would be for online tests to really limit the amount of time that students have to take the test. So, for example, if you have 50 questions on your test, give students only, I'm just making this up, but maybe you give students only 30 minutes to do the test. which means that they really do need to be prepared to answer those questions without stopping to look everything up all the time. So that's another strategy that many faculty use. Regarding the preference for group work versus individual work in online classes, I think there are two main things to think about. What was the first one? I just forgot it. One is, wow, that is funny. Okay, I know what I was going to say. Sorry about that. The purpose of the project being a group project or an individual project is the first and foremost thing to think about. Is there any actual value to asking students to work together? Does it align with your course learning goals and help students achieve the course learning goals? If so, then the group project might make sense. But if I know a lot of faculty, I don't know if anybody here does this, but I know that I personally have said, well, I guess every class is supposed to have a group project, so I'll put in a group project. And it's not really purposeful. So you first of all want to make sure that there is a good reason, a good pedagogical reason for having group work. But the other thing is that we know that many online students, and I'm going to qualify this, typically in the United States, which is of course what I'm more, students who choose online classes are usually working full-time and have family obligations. And so logistically speaking, it's just harder. Even if students aren't working, it's just harder to get online groups together. It requires aligning schedules because they aren't already in the class time. So again, if there's not a really good pedagogical reason, I think it's important to acknowledge the logistical challenge of online group. Be a reason not to do a group project if you didn't have another good reason. Hope that helps.
Thank you. There is another question from one of the. I think it's important to acknowledge the logistical challenge of online. Sorry, do you can hear me?
I can hear you now. There was a funny echo, but now.
Lovely. So one question from a math teacher, that how can they ensure more mathematical problem practice in online classes? Do you have any suggestion for that?
I saw another question that was submitted by the forum, and I don't know if this is the same question, but it was about teaching math and the challenge, since normally you would solving the problems there, say on the whiteboard in the classroom. But this one seems a little bit different about how to get students to do the practice. Is that accurate?
Yes, I guess both. Okay. How can teacher ensure practice during class time, as well as how can ensure the practice as homework or as assignment from the students' end?
Okay. Well, I don't math, so I cannot pretend to be an expert on that particular content area. But what I have seen in the last couple of months as people respond to the move to fully online is I have seen some very creative solutions with faculty and students using the tools that we all have. This is, can you see, this is my smartphone. And for example, I saw a video presentation from a faculty member who purchased, I think it's called a gooseneck cell phone holder. And it's essentially a little device that you can attach to your table or and then it holds the cell phone. I can't see what's showing on the camera right now. There we go. It holds the cell phone like this, and then you can record from the camera on the cell phone and just kind of do a live video stream, making the cell phone another participant. If I were writing on my desk, I would be doing this, and the cell phone would act as like a doc cam that would capture what I was doing. And maybe it's the case that students can do something similar. In fact, I am in these kinds of meetings all day long, and with faculty that I work with at my university. And oftentimes I just hold up my piece of paper and I say, see, this is what I'm working on right now. And maybe students can do that too, where you give them some time and either they could hold it up or perhaps take a picture with their smartphone of their work and submit or share that somehow. So I think using the tools that we have and just thinking creatively about how to use them differently will help. As far as getting students to solve the problems during class, or I would say even outside of class time, good question. I think it's a matter of structuring good online math practice problems. Maybe it would be a way of finding students, as one example, to go to the Khan Academy, just as an idea.
Hello, Darby.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir, please.
Not question, actually. I'm expecting your suggestion regarding my practice in taking online class that I'm going to share with you. Actually, before a particular lecture, I provide my students my recorded video lecture and supportive lecture notes. First, my students see my recorded video lecture, then they go through supportive lecture notes, and after that, they come for live discussion, and they finally sit for a quiz for their self-evaluation. So I usually, but currently I'm practicing it. So do you have any suggestion regarding this?
It sounds like you're already doing lots of good for your students. I don't know that anything else comes to mind besides what you're trying and learning and experimenting with. Do you have a specific question, something that you're thinking about doing, or?
So do you have any suggestion regarding my practices, or you can just rate it, that it's good, bad, or moderate, or it's like you should improve this area, or this practice is not right or wrong, or something like that?
I think you're already doing a lot of good things. So I think I would say you're doing good and working to be better. I only have one thought, and that is, for example, for the pre-recorded lectures, I have found that it's important to hold students accountable to do the work and, for example, to watch the videos. So we know there's very robust research that online students watch not more than 6 minutes of a recorded video lecture before they tune out and stop watching. There's good analytics on that. So I guess that would be one suggestion, is to break up your videos into very small chunks of 5 minutes or less, which means that you only cover one talking point usually. And then the other question I would have for you, or suggestion, is to add something that students have to do to having some success with. So I would encourage you to keep that conversation going among your own peer group here, learning from each other about what works, because you are in your context, you understand your students and your limitations and challenges and your opportunities as well. And so you can be each other's best resources. But really, I just want to conclude by saying I truly believe this is important work. Respect your engagement in it, and I wish you all the best, and I look forward to learning more from you as well.
Thank you again. So can you pronounce your name in Bengali terms, Darby, as you learned in the morning?
Do you want me to say goodbye from, let's see if I can say it again correctly. Fulmoni, did I say that?
Yeah, 100% right. That flower we call full, but when we name someone with flower, that we call Fulmoni.
Fulmoni.
And you pronounce it very rightly.
Can you?
And we found, yeah, sure.
Can I ask one question?
You go first.
Can you tell me how to say my name is Fulmoni?
Sorry.
Can you tell me in is it Bengali? How do you say my name is?
It's Bangla, and you have to say Amar Nam Fulmoni. Amar Nam Fulmoni. Yeah, correct. Say it together again. Amar Nam Fulmoni.
Amar Nam Fulmoni.
Great, 100.
Thank you.
And when we compliment the name, that how is your name? If we say that your name is very nice, then we say, Tomar naam khub sundar.
That one sounds harder. I'm not going to try it.
So you have a very beautiful name, Flower. Yeah, and the session was again excellent and overwhelming.
Thank you.
We'd like to have you again and again with us, and we would like to have you as our mentor to improve as your last principle for committing for continuous learning and improving. We hope you will have with us. You will support us to grow and to be one of the best university in the world as well, not only in Bangladesh.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure and truly my honor to be here with you tonight in your morning.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. And goodbye. Shall I just log off? I would prefer, Ajaj.
Yeah, you can log off and goodbye.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Goodbye.